Today, Jets tackle George Fant joins the show. George and I will talk about a cause close to his heart, Mike White, the final 4 weeks of the season for the Jets, and more. Then we get to your mailbag questions today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, December 14th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Today, our episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. It's Wednesday, which means we will have our weekly mailbag show today. But before we get to mailbag questions, we have a very special guest. Jets tackle George Fant joins me. George, a couple of weeks ago when the Jets played Minnesota, participated in the NFL's My Cause, My Cleats weekend. It's a weekend every year where the NFL lets players decorate their cleats to represent a cause close to their hearts. George and I talk about My Cause, My Cleats, and we also talk about the rest of the season for the Jets. That's ahead. Let's jump to my discussion with George Fant. Here today with Jets tackle George Fant. George, thanks so much for joining me. Let's begin by talking about My Cause, My Cleats. A couple weekends ago, the Jets were playing in Minnesota. It's a weekend each year where the NFL allows players to support causes dear to their hearts by displaying their support on their cleats. Can you talk a little bit about the cause you supported in Minnesota?
Yeah, I got to do my cause and my cleats, and this year I got to use I got to partner with Year Up. Obviously a nonprofit that works with young adults and youth in our community to help them with job training and helping them build their careers and getting them great internships with great companies. And for myself, I thought it was great nonprofit to partner with. Obviously because of myself and using our nonprofit, the Fan Foundation, to kind of help the youth in our community where I got to grow up at. It meant a lot to me, and I feel like that was a great nonprofit to partner with and a great organization to partner with.
What made you get involved with them?
Yeah, I just, for myself, I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I have my own foundation called the Fan Foundation, and our main focus is helping the youth in our community and helping them build their lives and careers, but just being able to come back to my community with some of my teammates and some of my friends and helping them just see that there's more outside of our small community, and just being able to let them meet different people and helping with we do like turkey drives, we do Christmas giveaways, and just being able to help, being able to talk to them, being able to just be in front of them, let them ask us questions, whatever they need to do. So that was probably one of the main reasons that we wanted to partner with Europe.
A wonderful cause. George,
Yeah,
let me ask you, I know you were a little banged up Sunday's game against Buffalo. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. It was definitely a quick little injury, but I was happy to be able to get back on the field, finish the game up.
So you think you'll be good to go this weekend against Detroit?
Most definitely. I'm excited. I'm just, home back here in New Jersey, getting some rehab and getting ready for the next game.
George, can you talk a little bit about how the locker room's responding? I know a tough couple of weeks, some very hard-fought losses against Minnesota and Buffalo. What's the feeling now after the first 2-game losing streak of the season?
I would just say that it was just no one's blinking. We know that this league, is everybody's good. And it's a situation that, we have 4 important games coming up now. So we're taking it day by day, week by week. And just, putting in work every single day, getting ready for the next 4 games.
Could you talk a little bit about Mike White and the way the locker rooms responded to him? It seems to me like the locker room's really behind him in a way that doesn't always happen when somebody steps in during the season. What is it about Mike White that has the team responding to him this way?
Man, I would just say that Mike's just a leader. He's one of those guys who's always going to be Mike White, no matter the situation. So I would say that's probably one of the main reasons why guys are gravitate to him and like to play for him and like to be around him. He's just a really good guy.
George, I got to say, as a Jets fan, this season's been amazing. It's been a long time since we've seen the Jets playing competitive football.
Mhm.
You guys should be very proud of what you're doing. I know last year, the team only won 4 games, but I'm just interested. Did you guys get the sense something was you guys were building something, even though maybe it didn't show up in the one loss record this time last year?
Yeah, most definitely. I would just say that Coach Saleh came in with a great culture, and good plan. And obviously them going out and getting some good young players and some players in free agency who's been at playing at a high level and played in playoffs and good leaders, and bringing those guys in here and kind of mixing that in. I think that's kind of the reasons why we are where we are right now.
Now, early in his career, Robert Saleh worked as an assistant under the guy who used to be your head coach, Pete Carroll. And I'm just wondering, you've played for both guys. If you see any similarity, the extent to which you see similarities between the two of them, their approaches, how they run their teams.
Yeah, that's definitely a good catch, man. Yeah, Coach. I would say that he takes a lot from Coach Carroll. There's a lot of things that we did in Seattle, and as far as culture wise, that we do here now. And I think those are really good and cool things that he added into his coaching style. I know that he looks up to Coach Carroll a lot, and a lot of things they do out in Seattle, that he brought here, and I think that a lot of guys are kind of taking to that, man. And I think that when you want to win a culture, you have to have the guys buy into that culture, and that's what Coach Saleh has done here in New York.
Could you take us through what it's like preparing for a game each week, what the weekly schedule is like for an NFL player, for fans who maybe don't know?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those, you play the game on Sunday. Monday, Tuesday is getting your body back ready, getting it ready for the week, and preparing mentally, looking at film, looking at your matchups, looking at what we need to do to win the game. And then Wednesday, Thursday are those days that we really want to put some work in on the field, get ourselves ready physically for the game. And then obviously we ride off from Friday to Sunday, and Sunday is game day, man. And I think that right now we just locked in for these next four. I know these next 4 weeks are going to be huge for us. We're going to take it day by day. We're going to get in here and play championship football every day in practice. So.
George, you're a guy with a lot of versatility. You played left tackle, you played right tackle. I mean, you've even switched between the two sides during games. What's the difference between the two positions? How difficult is it to switch from one side to another?
Yeah, I would say it just kind of like it would try to pick your body chain, like the strength, the different set angles, the different ways you got to use your technique, different sides or different rushers. It's all kind of different things, man. But I would just say that I've been blessed and happy to be able to play both sides. I've been in different situations where I had to do that, and I know a lot of guys can't do that sometimes. So I'm happy to be able to do that, and whatever the team needs to get a win. So whatever we need, I'm just trying to help win games.
I know it's a little early in the week, but what do you think the
Mhm.
biggest challenges are for you this week when you face Detroit?
Yeah, man, Detroit's rolling right now, man. They're playing really good football. I would just say it's just containing their defensive rushers and their players. They have really good defense. I just think right now it's just going to be locking in, understanding what we're trying to do to win the game, and going out there Wednesday, Thursday, knocking those things out so we can get ready to win the game.
Now, I know a little bit earlier this season you missed some time. You were injured. What's it like rehabbing an injury? Are you around the team while you're rehabbing, but you're not playing games, or are you kind of separate from the team?
Yeah, it's obviously not a good fun situation. It's one of those things where you're kind of by yourself with the training staff, putting in the work at a high level. It's not easy to do, but it's one of those things where you have to stay locked in. You have to stay ready. You got to know that you're getting ready to do something to get yourself ready to go back there and play at a high level. So it's like I said, it's not easy, but it's one of those things that you have to just kind of knock out and put your head down and grind.
Now, I know you're in the last year of your contract. I'm not going to ask you about what's going to happen in the future because I know you probably
Yeah.
don't know as much as anybody. But I want to go back to
Yeah.
2020 when you were a free agent and you decided to sign with the Jets. And it's just something I've always been interested in. When you're a free agent, what makes the decision for you? Is it just the most money? Is it playing time? Is it the organization? And if it's a combination of the three, what's the most important thing when you're a free agent when you're looking for a team?
Yeah, honestly, I would say it's the combination of the three. It's an opportunity. Going in, leaving Seattle, I was, the fifth offensive lineman playing a lot of big tight end. But I obviously wanted to play a starting role at a tackle. So that played a big played a big part in me coming here to New Jersey, New York, whatever, and being able to have the opportunity to play at a high level. I knew that I was a really good tackle, and I just needed a great opportunity. And I felt like this is a place for me to go do it at.
Well, George, my last question is just: do you have any message for the Jets fans out there as they cheer you guys down the stretch, hoping we could end this 11-year playoff drought?
Yeah, I would just stay with us, man. We're locked in. Make sure you guys stay locked in. We're just gonna take it play by play, week by week, man. So I know we're locked in and ready to go play for you guys.
All right, George, thank you, and good luck the rest of the way. We're all pulling for you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. The Jets have been so banged up at tackle this season that they've had to sign players during the season. Fortunately, George Fant is back now, so they won't have to worry about finding a new tackle, but your small business may need to make some hires as we approach the new year. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you have to do is create a job posting for free on LinkedIn Jobs. Then you add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find a sneak preview of Think Like a Champion, available right now as a bonus episode of Locked On Presents. Think Like a Champion is a brand new podcast from Russell Wilson and Audible. Russ is a champion on the field, but off it, we rarely know the grind on the path to greatness. Each episode features interviews with Olympic medalists, NFL stars, and business leaders. Hosts will swap stories and share proven mental techniques that have gotten the world's most elite performers across the finish line and beyond. It's available for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts. So head over to Locked On Presents for a sneak preview of Think Like a Champion, or catch the full series available everywhere now. Audible. Get in the game. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now let's get to our mailbag questions. Each Wednesday we try and do a mailbag show. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions. Our first question is not surprisingly about Mike White. John, if Mike White continues to perform, what sort of contract do you expect the Jets to offer? And is it starter money? What does that mean for Zach Wilson and the backup quarterback role, knowing Flacco will not be returning? Well, I'm glad that Flacco won't be returning. I think I owe Joe Douglas an apology because over the last 2 years I've been very critical of how he's handled quarterback depth, and I probably underestimated Mike White. So, Joe Douglas handled the backup quarterback spot far better than I gave him credit for. One thing, however, I do not owe him an apology for is my criticism of bringing Joe Flacco in, because I think we've seen there's just not much left in the tank with Joe Flacco. And with all due respect to Joe Flacco, because Joe Flacco has had a long and distinguished career in the NFL, unfortunately, none of those distinguished parts have come with the New York Jets, aside from that game against Cleveland. I'll give him the game against Cleveland, but Joe Flacco really has not brought a lot to the table for the Jets. So the question is, what about Mike White? And of course, Mike White's got to finish the season strong. But let's say, the Jets win 3 of their next 4, they get to the playoffs, White plays well. What happens then? It's a little tricky because I was looking through quarterback contracts, and pretty much everybody who's a starting quarterback in this league either has like a $30 million contract or is on a rookie deal. Anybody who's got a long-term contract to play quarterback in this league, they're either making very good money or they're not, or they were just drafted. So there are not many guys like Mike White, and I don't think Mike White's getting a $30 million contract, and I do not think that would be a wise move by the Jets. So the only guy who I could kind of find who was middle of the pack was Jameis Winston, whose contract is on an annual salary of maybe like $14 million a year. And I think that somewhere along those lines is going to be the middle road for Mike White, where I see something like a 2-year contract, maybe somewhere between $10 and $15 million a year, because by that point, he's probably going to deserve more than backup money. So I think he's got to make more than like $6 million a year, which I guess would be 6, 7, 8. That's probably good backup money. But you can't give him $30 million a year on a handful of starts. And part of this is that there also has to be a robust market for another quarterback. And Mike White's shown an ability to function within the Jets system, but could he function outside the Jets system? I don't know. So I think there's probably going to be some middle ground somewhere, and that's probably where White ends up. Now, as far as Zach Wilson goes, a lot of it depends on how Mike White finishes the season. If Mike White takes the Jets to the playoffs, you would presume he's going to come back and he's going to at least begin next season as the starting quarterback. But I don't really see any incentive for getting rid of Zach Wilson. I think if you view Zach Wilson in the context that he's a developmental quarterback, that's going to take some time if it's going to happen. If you get yourself out of the mindset that he was this elite prospect who the Jets drafted number 2 overall, because I think in retrospect, he wasn't. In retrospect, he was a much bigger project than the Jets realized at the time. So if you view Zach Wilson as a guy who probably should have gone, late day 2, maybe early day 3, then it becomes much easier to view him as a developmental prospect. It becomes much easier to view him as a guy where it's going to take some time, where you're not upset that he hasn't developed yet. And I think that's a tough thing to do because he was drafted 2nd overall, but that's a sunk cost. So I think you bring Zach Wilson back. I think you continue to try and develop him. And Mike White, and this is just a scenario. We don't know how Mike White's going to finish the season. If Mike White finishes the season terribly, he may not be back. And Zach Wilson may have a shot at winning the job next year. So a lot of it does depend on how Mike White finishes the season, but that's how I view it. Is he'll probably get some sort of like middle of the road bridge contract, and Zach Wilson sticks around, and Zach Wilson has a chance to win the starting job if Mike White struggles. And if Mike White plays well, then Zach Wilson sticks around. He's the backup. And you keep trying to develop him on the practice field. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Next question, John. Is it truly inconceivable that we could legitimately see Offensive Rookie of the Year Garrett Wilson, Defensive Rookie of the Year Sauce Gardner, Defensive Player of the Year Quinnen Williams? Can you think of another team that ever accomplished something like this, or at least both offensive and defensive rookies of the year? So yes, it's actually happened twice, at least as far as the AP goes, where the same team has won Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year in the same season. In fact, it happened the first year the AP gave out Offensive and Defensive Rookies of the Year. It was 1967. Mel Farr, a running back of the Detroit Lions, won it. And then Lem Banley, a cornerback from Detroit, won it. And then the second time it happened was 2017 with the New Orleans Saints, where the Saints had that amazing draft class. Alvin Kamara was the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Marshawn Lattimore was the Defensive Rookie of the Year. And it's absolutely got a shot at happening. At least, Quinnen Williams does have a shot at Defensive Player of the Year, but Offensive Rookie of the Year, Garrett Wilson's got a great shot. It's not going to be tight, but Garrett Wilson's right up there with anybody. And part of it's that there's really not a standout quarterback who's running. If a quarterback plays great as a rookie, he's going to run away with the award. And you don't have a quarterback who's running away with the awards. Garrett Wilson's in the mix. If he finishes strong, he's got a real shot. And on the defensive side of the ball, it's interesting because it's not easy to win the award as a corner. Because part of it's you got to develop buzz. When you're a defensive end, you can get a lot of sacks, and you can just make people notice you. At corner, it takes some time to develop. People don't realize this. People always focus on Darrelle Revis' 2009 season. What everybody forgets is Darrelle Revis was great in 2008. He just kind of flew under the radar until 2009. It took him year 2 of elite play for people to notice it. But Sauce Gardner is generating that buzz already. And at the corner position, half the battle is generating the buzz, and Sauce Gardner's doing it. And part of it's, he was the 4th overall pick, so it's a little bit easier when you're a top 5 pick. But he's done it. He's shut down guys he's faced. He's earned it. He's earned it, but it's not just about earning it. He's gotten the hype. So it absolutely could happen for the Jets, and it shows you why this team's so different this year. It doesn't take that many guys. A couple of elite players change everything for your team. And look at the way this defense is. Look how much better this defense is. It's really a handful of guys who have made this defense better. Part of it's Quinnen Williams elevating his game, but it's also Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed. Those guys almost alone have changed this defense. It's an amazing thing. But yes, I think there's absolutely a chance for it to happen. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll keep talking about the Jets defense. It hasn't been quite as good since the bye, has it? I'll tell you what I think as we continue this Wednesday mailbag edition of the show. The Jets face the Detroit Lions this weekend. The game's almost a pick'em game. The favorite keeps changing. Jets are at home, though, and they have the better record. If you believe in the Jets, let me tell you something. BetOnline is your #1 source for sports betting, stats, news, and analysis. And this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup, they've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, of course you do. You're listening to this one. Well, you can also find those at BetOnline as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get all of your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday mailbag show. Our next question, is the Jets defense overrated? It seems like it to me, especially in the clutch the last 2 weeks. With 2 of the hottest offenses coming into our building, I'm not feeling confident. I don't think the Jets defense is overrated at all. I think they gave Josh Allen a very hard time on Sunday. What I'd say is that for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like the Jets defense has been as good since the bye. And they still have been good, but they've had these stretches. It feels like every game there's a slump in the game. And New England moved the ball very well against them, but then they began the next week against the Bears and did not play well the first quarter and a half. The Vikings, they got off to a terrible start. And then against the Bills, they did get off to a good start, but there was this stretch from the last drive of the second quarter through the third quarter where they just didn't play well. So I think it's not so much that the D's overrated. I think the D's still very good. I just think they're having these stretches where they can't get they can't get a stop. So it's like they have these in-game slumps. But, you look at the talent, it's still there. It's still a very good unit. And I have a lot of faith in them. I think that they will bounce back to form. And it's not like you saw what they did last year. This defense is way better than what we saw last year. So it's not a dire situation, but I do think there's been a little bit of fall off. I don't think they've been as consistent. They're not playing 60 minutes anymore. And you hope that changes going forward. Next question from Kevin. John, I've seen some rumors that the Jets are contemplating a stadium in Queens. Do you think there's any merit to those? We all know how the Hudson Yards proposal turned out. It's always impossible to say. The one thing that makes me feel like the answer is probably no to this is the Jets paid a lot of money to build MetLife Stadium. So I don't know. If you spent hundreds of millions of dollars to own MetLife Stadium, would you move out? Listen, there's always possible that they get some ridiculous deal that makes it worth their while. But I think the Jets are probably going to stay at MetLife Stadium. It's not like the old stadium. So in the old stadium, the Jets were the tenants. The Jets essentially paid rent to the Giants, and the Giants own the stadium. This new stadium's different. This new stadium's 50-50. The Jets and Giants, they both own the stadium. So it's not. I think if the Jets were still in the old stadium under the old arrangements, it would be more likely. There's always there's always a possibility that they just get some deal that's too good to refuse. But I think it's more likely that they're staying at MetLife Stadium. We'll see what happens. And our last question. After the Jets game, some of us watched the 49ers beat Tampa Bay with offense and defense. The 49ers have a few better skill position players, but we've seen Mike LaFleur's game plans and play calling, and sometimes are left shaking our heads. If you watch the 49ers, everything seems to flow. Mike LaFleur came from the same tree, but seems nowhere near the level of his mentor. I know there's play calling and execution, but something isn't working here. What's your take? I think that there are always things you can look back on with Mike LaFleur. I think Michael LaFleur has his bad games, but I think it's more execution. I think play calling is very easy to jump on, but plays don't work because the players don't execute more often than not. I mean, you could call essentially like the difference between a great play call where you get praised and a terrible play call where you get criticized is whether or not the players do their jobs. And the Jets have faced some tough teams. So that Buffalo defense is an excellent defense. So I think it's tough to get on them over that. The Jets have not gotten good enough quarterback play through most of the season. Joe Flacco wasn't very good the first 3 weeks aside from, a few stretches against Cleveland. Zach Wilson really wasn't that good aside from maybe that fourth quarter against Pittsburgh. Maybe you can find another spot or two there. It's tough to win it's tough to look good as a coordinator when you're getting this level of quarterback play. And this past week against Buffalo, I mean, the Bills are a great defense. The Jets' offense was a little overmatched in that one. We'll see what happens. I'm not acting like Michael LaFleur hasn't made mistakes. I think you can question his red zone play calling against Minnesota. I think there were some moments where you wonder a little bit what he's doing against Buffalo. But I think the coaches tend to take too much blame when things go wrong. It's really about the players. It's a players' league. It's always been a players' league. It's always going to be a players' league. And when the Jets, if the Jets score a lot of points this weekend, I don't think Michael LaFleur, it'll be a result of Michael LaFleur doing things much better. I think it'll be the players executing at a higher level. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.